Welcome to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Joyous conversations about what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about our one reality. You have nothing to fear. You are eternal and you are perfectly loved. Knowing the truth changes everything. Now, here's Roberta.
Welcome to Seek Reality. I'm Roberta Grimes, and I'm so glad you're with us today. Seek Reality listeners often tell me who their favorite guests are, what topics they most enjoy, and what topics we've been neglecting, and they don't like that. And one of the topics some of you have been told me is most neglected here is reincarnation. Reincarnation is a fact. Jesus taught it, although the First Council of Nicaea in 325 tried to remove every reference to it that they could find in the Gospels. Fortunately, though, they didn't get them all. And those that we used to think were dead have told us in great detail how reincarnation happens, why it happens, and everything they say fits smoothly with what Jesus told us. And also with the afterlife evidence. Reincarnation is a fact. There's no way around that. And it's central to the reason why this universe even exists. But there are very few living experts in the field of reincarnation. So I was thinking I might have to do a solo Seek Reality program on the topic, and you wouldn't want that. You love it when we have guests. So then I discovered our guest today, who was with us all the way from the Netherlands. Our guest is another wonderful White Crow author, published in Great Britain by my dear friend John Beecher, who is the prestige publisher in the field of afterlife education. And our guest today is Titus Rivas. Titus is a meticulous Dutch reincarnation researcher in the mold of the extraordinary Dr. Ian Stevenson, who is late of the University of Virginia. Titus's book was co-authored with Indian researcher Dr. K.S. Rawat and out just this year. It's called Reincarnation as a Scientific Concept, and it is so badly needed. Titus has been researching reincarnation for decades, and he and Dr. Rawat have compiled a great and very readable summary of the state of play among disciplined researchers in the field of reincarnation. The scholarship in this field until now has been narrow, although it's been deep in spots. For example, Dr. Stevenson's books are phenomenal. I recommend them all. But Titus and Dr. Rawat are now seeking to broaden the field, to make this information accessible to more people who probably don't have the time to do the kind of in-depth reading that dealing with Dr. Stevenson really seems to require of us. He wants to make the truth of reincarnation more comfortable, frankly, to the Western ear. Titus, welcome. I am so glad you're with us today.
Thank you so much for having me, Roberta.
One thing that people like is if we have someone new, and you are new to us today, is they'd like to know a little bit about what got you into this field. I mean, this is studying reincarnation. And people think I have loony hobbies. For example, I've spent 50 years trying to understand the afterlife. That seems pretty loony to a lot of people. But just concentrating in reincarnation, that's a very deep dive. What got you started in that?
Well, I was raised a Catholic. And I never doubted the existence of an afterlife because, I lost my faith in Catholicism afterwards. But the topic of survival after death always appealed to me. It, resonated with something inside me, I think. Maybe some hidden subconscious knowledge of where I came from. You know what I mean?
Yes.
When I was 19 years old, I was trying to get more knowledge about other religions and about paranormal phenomena, etc. And I stumbled upon the works by Dr. Ian Stevenson.
Yes.
You have already mentioned. And especially his basic book, 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation. Now, I read that book and I was really struck by the quality of the evidence. And I decided that I wanted to find similar cases here in the Netherlands or in other European countries. And for me, it was really wonderful because it meant that my intuition that there was something correct about the traditional view of an afterlife. I mean that there is an afterlife.
Yes.
That it can be founded in serious empirical research. So that appealed to me a lot, and I really became enthusiastic for such research.
Well, you were really young too. What was it that struck you about it? I mean, I loved Dr. Stevenson's books. I read quite a few of them actually, and everyone who's listening, 20 Cases Suggestive of Reincarnation is really the classic in this field. So you started off, Titus, in a good place.
Well, yeah, more or less. Yeah, I had read other books about psychic phenomena already.
Yes.
During high school, and I also contacted peers during my high school years who were also interested, just like me, in the paranormal. So I had some experiences in that sense.
Yes.
Talking about things and exchanging titles of books, etc. But this book was so well researched. It had such a high rational and empirical level.
Yes.
That I was really impressed by it.
He writes like a scholar, and you tell that when he writes something, there's good evidence for it. I think that's one reason he's resonated so much with people.
Yes, I think so. Yeah. He's really searching for facts and how to explain them.
Yes.
And that is, something that you often don't encounter in more popular.
In this field, that's right. You certainly don't encounter it. A lot of people are just in for whatever's sensational. But no, he's a wonderful scholar. So did you find anything in the Netherlands? Did you find cases like his?
Yeah, maybe not as well documented nor verified, but there are quite a lot of cases. I've found dozens of cases here in the Netherlands of young children who are around the age of 3 to 5, mostly, spontaneously recall a past life and mention quite a lot of details of who they were, who others were in that life, meaning, for example, a spouse or children. And I mean, in a really detailed way, with names and all, and also details about his profession and important events that occurred during that life. So those cases are here as well. They do occur here in the Netherlands as well.
But they're much more rare. Yeah. What seems to be the case is that the places where Dr. Stevenson found most of his cases are countries where the culture embraces reincarnation. So in most of the Western countries, it's surmised that people who have a child of 2 or 3 who suddenly starts talking about a past life will be embarrassed by the child, will think there's something, people will think something wrong with little, Joey or Susie if they ever hear them saying these things, so they hush the kid up. And that seems to be why there are certain cases.
That's how it goes, yeah. That's correct. And one of the things I have noticed is that traditionally it's mostly women, mothers, who open up about such cases. Dads are usually much less into it.
Yes, I think so. Yes.
Just something of an imagination gone wild, childish fantasy, and nothing more. And they find it even ridiculous that you want to investigate the case. Not in all cases. There are fathers as well who take their child's memory seriously, but it's mostly women until now.
So in which countries have you done this research? Obviously in the Netherlands, and any other European countries or in India?
One very interesting case in Hungary, together with an international team led by the Society for Psychical Research from Great Britain. Incidentally, I have also studied some claims in Spain, and by correspondence, I've also been in touch with parents from other countries. But my own research concentrates on the Netherlands.
Right. Well, tell me about the Hungary case. How did you find out about it, even?
Well, it's really quite an old case from the 1930s, and it concerns a Hungarian girl who was also a medium, by the way, who all of a sudden seemed to have died, or seemed to have disappeared. I mean, spiritually or psychologically, and to have been replaced by a Spanish personality from Madrid.
Wow.
And the Hungarian girl was called Iris, and the Spanish woman, because it was already a grown woman, was called Lucia. And it appears that she gave quite a lot of details about her life in Spain. But unfortunately, the skeptics simply blocked all efforts to verify her claims. So we know very little about what might have been paranormal and what might have been just fantasy or normal knowledge.
Right. Well, but you put together this picture then of that this is real. Basically, reincarnation happens. Dr. Stevenson called it solving the cases. You can solve the case in many cases of a child who claims to have been a different person. You can go find that different person's family and get all the details, right?
That's right, yeah. In the best cases, that's what happens, yeah.
I mean, things like they'll walk into a house, and this is from Dr. Stevenson's work. They walk into a house, they greet the little girl greets the former husband and the children who are now grown, and maybe scolds them, goes into a back room and it's a dirt floor, digs in the floor and gets some coins out that woman there. That kind of thing is so amazing, don't you think?
If you don't know anything about it, yes, it must be very amazing and surprising or even unbelievable to many people, yeah. I
had trouble believing that it was possible because I came from a very strictly Christian background, and Dr. Stevenson's books were such a revelation to me, and that's exactly how I read them. It was like, oh my goodness, that's so amazing. I really enjoyed them. It was such, because it is serious stuff. He writes like this is serious. You know it's real, but it's still hard to believe.
Yeah, but somehow I believed him the very moment I read his book. Very, very big impression on me.
Yeah, for sure. Well, you were young too, and I think when you're in your late teens, early 20s, these things can strike you. I discovered him when I was older, but the people that report this kind of a previous life very often will bear the scars. This is a syndrome, and I think we ought to explain that. This isn't how we all reincarnate. Reincarnation happens to all of us. They say repeatedly, and I could do a whole sort of program just talking about all the things we know about general reincarnation, but there's very little evidence of it. What's great about these cases is they are evidence that it easily does happen. But these are cases where usually someone died violently. They were in a plane crash, they were murdered, something, and it was not a planned exit point, which we all usually leave at. And they didn't transition normally, and they ended up effectively we don't know whether it's a spirit possession or how they get into, but they enter a new fetus in a woman walking around, and they're born. And very often that new baby will have the scars of the previous murder or accident or whatever it was that happened. Someone was killed with a shotgun, and he had freckles all over his chest where the shotgun blast had been, for example.
That's right. Yes. And maybe still scars, birthmarks or birth defects.
Yes.
That are related to the mode of death or events that happened shortly before death. Traumatic events. And apart from that, there are also cases in which the death was simply very sudden, very unexpected.
Yes. Yeah.
Without much violence, but yes, simply because the person in question did not expect to die yet.
Right. Exactly. But they don't ever seem to report being a person who died in bed at 93, for example.
No, that's not entirely correct, Roberta. There are cases in which there is no obvious reason for the child to recall the previous life, other than that the child seemed to have been trained very well, mentally trained via meditation or other techniques, so that he or she controlled the mind to a greater extent than average, and that might, in some cases, also explain the availability of memories of a past life. This is also claimed, by the way, about the Buddha, who, through meditation, would also have achieved a lot of knowledge about his past lives.
So are you saying that the person who was the previous personality for these young kids had a more trained mind? Is that what you're saying?
That's also possible. In many cases, there's a sudden or violent death, but not in all cases. And for example, there are cases of monks who were trained very well and end up recalling the present life in the next life, as a child.
Well, that's fascinating because I don't remember reading. This hasn't been a major area of interest of mine anyway, but I don't remember reading about those cases. So the young child is say 20 years old and would recall being a monk and would recall details of that monk's life, but the monk died in bed at 97 or whatever. There's no earthly reason why the child would have recalled that, except that the monk had a more trained mind, more disciplined mind, was a meditator and so on. Is that what you're saying?
That's what I'm saying, yes.
Okay.
Claimed by Ian Stevenson's successor with the University of Virginia, Dr. Jim Tucker. So,
yes.
On the one hand, we all acknowledge that there is a large role for traumatic death, a violent, sudden death, but that's not the whole story. There are also cases in which other factors related to memory apparently do play a role as well.
Well, that's good to know. But the thing to remember, everyone, is that we all reincarnate. Even if we have no memory whatsoever of ever having been in anybody else, we all reincarnate. And because there is no objective time, we're told that all our lives are happening at the same time. So if you want to cross your eyes, all you do is think of that and it makes your eyes cross. But in fact, even though you don't have a conscious memory of another lifetime, you can be regressed under hypnosis to remember previous lifetimes. I've been through this myself when I was I was experimenting with everything, and I experimented with this, and it worked. My experience with there was that when you get regressed, it's to the period right before the death in that previous lifetime. And I allowed it to happen 3 times, and that was it, in one sitting. I wouldn't even finish out the hour with a woman because it was just too awful to Suddenly I was this person, and I knew this person. After the first time it happened, I knew this person was just about to have some horrible experience or to die, but not in bed, and they were going to die violently. So I didn't do that anymore. But for a lot of people, it can be difficult because being regressed that way to some time when they fell off a cliff or something can make them stop being afraid of heights. Just that memory is enough to resolve some psychological issues in this lifetime. So that's another thing about reincarnation, which is quite fascinating.
It's fascinating, yes. I wouldn't say that all regressions are reliable and true, but there are also cases in which fantasy must be important as well. Well, that's why Stevenson wasn't very fond of this type of research, of regression research, I mean. But I do agree that there are a few cases, at least, in which the memories were verified and confirmed by external sources such as archives or the memories of living people.
Right.
It's not just all nonsense. And I also agree that it may be very therapeutic, even if it is just a fantasy, to be regressed to a past life and more that relive the traumatic experience, because it also may work that way during one and the same earthly life. If you experience a traumatic event during your childhood, it may be really healing to relive it as an adult and to free yourself from it.
Yes. Yeah. No, it's I think that it's very important for all of us to focus on our present life. That's one reason we come into these lives with such complete amnesia about so many things, because we're here to learn and to grow. And so this is where our minds should be. But don't you feel that understanding that reincarnation does happen is helpful to people as we go through this life?
Yeah, of course, yeah. Why not? Why shouldn't it? Because first of all, it implies that there is survival after death. That we don't cease to exist and become annihilated when we die.
Right.
And it's a very good source of evidence, because it's very hard to explain these cases away, especially in children,
right,
who never knew the past life personality or his or her social circles in this life. Then the information is totally paranormal, and it can't be a plausible motive for the child to have searched for that information through, say, super psi, through clairvoyance or telepathy. It really must be some type of memory of the very child. So that, it's an exceptionally good source of evidence for an afterlife,
yes,
for the fact that we do survive death. So, first of all, in that sense, it must be very, very impressive and positive, especially for Westerners who have a rational attitude.
I think that you're absolutely right about that. And one of the things I loved about your book was that it had some terrific appendices with some they weren't really so much scholarly works as just very, very good articles on related topics, which let people go deeper into the topic of reincarnation. I don't have the book in front of me. Talk about a couple of those. I thought they were excellent. I read all of them.
Yeah, one of the topics we touch upon in the appendices is the topic of pre-birth memory or pre-existence memory, and its relation to memories of an intermediate state or intermission period between two earthly lives. And it turns out to be the case that children who recall a past life may also recall a spiritual realm in which they dwelt before they came to their present body. Sorry. And those memories may even be paranormal. They may contain elements that they couldn't have known normally. For example, they may perceive their future parents before they reincarnate, and they may see specific events that happened to those parents before they were even conceived. And such things are quite spectacular, I would say.
Yes, yes, they are.
Yeah.
And they're rare too. It's very seldom that we have. There have been some people who have specialized in regressing people and hypnosis to lives between lives, but it's a very sort of narrow field. And this is another area, I think, where I think it's very good evidence if people can remember these things, and if it doesn't even matter if we can verify what happened in one particular situation, but if repeatedly people are regressed to the time between lives and their experiences have some of the same characteristics, that's by itself very good evidence that it's a real phenomenon and not something else.
Yeah, I agree, Roberta. Yeah. And a couple of scholars in this field also stress the so-called convergence of data, meaning that data from various subfields, such as reincarnation or pre-existence, spiritual pre-existence, all point in the same direction. And they don't... They can be reconciled with each other very easily. So there's no, how would I call it? It's not as if all those fields led to different conclusions.
Yes. One of the things I think...
old fantasy, that's what one would expect, that each field or subfield would lead in a different direction, but it's not like that.
Doesn't happen that way, no. One of the problems I think that people have doing things in this field from a scientific perspective, and it's clear you're a very careful researcher, just like Dr. Stevenson, but one of the problems we have is that we are living in this very material reality, and it's only natural that we would reason outward from this reality. But the more we learn about all of these phenomena that are related to life after death, the more we realize that that's an even bigger reality. And it's, if we can make ourselves able to reason from there instead of here, we can understand so much more. I'm only now wrestling with that fact.
Yeah, I think it is only logical to think that the afterlife, the spiritual realm, or however you want to call it, is much more extensive, much richer, has many more dimensions or levels than this physical world.
Yep.
We're living here in something like a school or something like that, where we have to learn certain things. At least that's my own conviction.
I think you're right. Absolutely right. Yep.
It's just a tiny part of a much greater reality.
I have said that to some people who didn't know much about it, and they just despaired. It's hard enough to figure out this reality. I can't be figuring out something even bigger. But I think that there's going to be scholarly work in this field done. I think that the work that you're doing and others are doing in areas of afterlife research are going to be tremendously helpful as we try to put it all together and make sense of this gigantic reality that we believe that the physical universe, we now believe it's maybe 5% of what exists. And there's a lot more then to be discovered. So very exciting time, I think, to be alive.
Yes. And it's only the beginning, because we're just one of the first generations who study these things.
Right.
From the 1800s or so.
Right.
But say in 1,000 years or so, the knowledge will be much more complete, of course.
Yes. But I can't wait. I want to put it together now. Where is your own research going? Where are you going now?
Well, together with a friend of mine, we're starting to study cases of deathbed visions.
Yes.
Shared death experiences, because I'm not only a reincarnation researcher, but also a survival researcher in general. And I wrote a book about near-death experiences, which was also translated into English, The Self Does Not Die.
Uh-huh.
We studied, myself and two friends of mine, Annie Derven and Rudolf Smit, we studied cases with paranormal aspects that were externally confirmed by third parties, for example, by physicians or nurses or relatives or friends. And we did a very extensive study of the available literature, and we found more than 100 cases in which paranormal perceptions, etc., could be confirmed by third parties. So not just through the patient, him or herself, but also via other persons, which is even more important from a scientific point of view.
Wow. For example, what kind of experiences were you looking at?
Several quite famous cases. For example, the case of Pam Reynolds.
Yeah.
You must have heard of her.
Of course. Explain to everyone about the case of Pam Reynolds. That's a big one.
Was someone who had an aneurysm in her brain, and she had to undergo a very difficult, very complex surgical operation, in which they applied a method which is called the standstill method. And this means that the patient is more or less put to death.
Right.
Not totally, but at a neurological level, they switch off the brain completely because they want to be able to operate on the brain.
Don't they drain it of blood too? Didn't they do that, or make it so that there was limited blood because it was an aneurysm?
Yeah, that's right, but also because they didn't want any interference of the processes in the brain.
And they chilled her whole body down, so she was like...
That's also part of the standstill procedure.
Wow.
And, well, there is some debate about whether she could see things while being completely in that standstill state of mind, a neurological standstill, I should say, or whether it was just beforehand. But one way or the other, around the surgery, so during the surgery or shortly before the surgery, she did perceive, for example, medical instruments that they used. And she perceived them in such a way that it couldn't be explained normally.
Yeah, she was out of her
very present.
Yep.
Sorry? The very presence of consciousness would also be inexplicable in that situation, because there shouldn't be any type of consciousness whatsoever.
No.
So we did a very extensive investigation of the literatures, meaning the original report by Michael B. Sabin, and also contacted several people involved in the operation. For example, Dr. Spetzler, the neurosurgeon. We also went to a lot of debates with skeptical debunkers who simply didn't want to believe that the case was true, that it was paranormal.
Right.
Our conclusion is that even if she didn't perceive anything during standstill, but just beforehand, it would still be inexplicable within a materialistic worldview, because even if it was before the operation, during the period that she was going into anesthesia, etc., there shouldn't have been enough brain activity to explain her consciousness, let alone to explain any specific perception. And yeah, there are many cases which are to some less spectacular, but one way or the other, it's still quite certain that there are many NDEs, many near-death experiences, which are accompanied by paranormal experiences that can be confirmed by others. Also experiences of telepathy, for example, while being in a coma or even during death, etc., etc. And
who were in a coma, they could report conversations that happened in another part of the hospital or even outside the hospital and do that accurately. That kind of thing is quite astonishing. It's rare, but it's quite astonishing.
It's quite astonishing, but to make it paranormal, there shouldn't be enough brain activity to explain it. Because for a materialist, what really counts is the amount of activity, especially in the cerebral cortex, that would be necessary for conscious experiences and conscious thought, etc. So not all of these cases could be used by us, but yeah, we still reached a number of more than 100 cases.
Wow, good for you.
Mostly from the literature. We just studied books and articles and contacted people involved, if that was possible. But there are also several cases which we studied ourselves. And our conclusion is that NDEs can't be explained away in a normal way. It's simply impossible. And there must be something like a soul or non-physical psyche that leaves the body, even if only temporarily, during cardiac arrest, and that enters a non-physical realm, as a spiritual realm, or whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at that material and comparing it with reincarnation research, we're seeing the same kind of convergence that I already mentioned.
Yes.
Data all pointing in the same direction.
Yeah, that's how I ended up first believing it was possible for there to be life after death to begin with. We had a great number of excellent communications received in the latter part of the 19th, first 3 decades of the 20th century. And a lot of them were preserved, and they even wrote books about them at the time. And of course, science ignored them all. But it was really a heyday of communication. And when I first started to do this research in the 70s, you could find those books in bookstores. I would go around, I obviously use bookstores. I bought a bunch of them and I read them, and it was impossible for them to be real if there was no afterlife, because southern England, eastern United States, that is where they all were received over 60 or 70 years, and all of them talked about the same stuff. I never saw duplicated communications, but it was the same process, the same physics, the same pastimes, the same clothing, the same everything. A lot of peculiar details, that it was always the same kind of thing, really, Titus. When you get a lot of these accounts together, and there's no possibility that there was copying, and they all say the same stuff, there's no possibility that's not true. Convince me.
Really impressive, yes. And even more so if the mediums involved were naive about, let's say, spiritualist theories or theorizing. and
These
still
all,
came up with the same kind of story.
Right. This was the heyday of physical mediums, which there are no physical mediums now really who can do very much, because it takes decades of sitting in the dark night after night to become a good physical medium. But some of these people were really good. It's just that they were never present when this was happening. They were in trance. They had to be told later what happened. So they really didn't. They knew less than the people who routinely attended their seances. Quite astonishing. And it really has been stonewalled. This evidence has been stonewalled for the last 150 years. You are wonderful to be pulling together really solid cases and even working with the skeptics, really the deniers. They're not skeptical. They're just out to debunk whatever they can. Mm-hmm. It's good to be trying. I've given up a long time ago trying.
Yeah, to be honest, we have already given up on them as well, but still, yeah, you need to do some debates about certain cases, simply because there's also an audience, as a general public wants to be informed, and sometimes that means that you have to deal with very different opinions and very different attitudes.
Yeah, I mean, the reckoning is going to come, because people really don't know. People who are going about their lives trusting science have no idea how bankrupt it is, completely bankrupt. This is only an example of it. They're going through the motions now. No major discoveries are happening because it's basically a belief system. It's a belief system that is not based in anything real. I mean, they believe everything is material or derived from matter. And that's just the way it is. And it's nonsense. So you're right. We have to help them using this information. We have to help everybody understand what's real. You're right.
Yeah. You sometimes have no choice. You simply have to deal with them sometimes.
Yes.
But we do avoid it nowadays, because we have been going through a lot of quite nasty experiences with real debunkers. On the other hand, they are not all like that. There are also a few quite civilized and polite skeptics or debunkers. And yeah, the advantage of dealing with them is that they at least don't insult you or offend you. Simply respect you as a person.
It's gone through a period of time, say starting 20 years ago. They were very, very active and very in people's faces. But they can't get anywhere because, frankly, it's very hard to sell a lie, and it's very hard to always manage to defeat the truth. So when I first started, for example, blogging about 10 years ago, I would get them all the time. I never get them now. Most people really are much more skeptical than they are actively hostile, which is a good thing. But you're right. We're going to have to figure out a way to do this, but we are going to have to do some direct debates with people who really know what they're talking about, and show that these people basically, the emperor has no clothes and hasn't had any for quite a long time.
Yes, I've used that metaphor myself, yeah.
So what do you hope people take away from our conversation today?
Well, I hope that they will conclude that there has been some quite serious research into topics like reincarnation and also near-death experiences and similar related phenomena. And it is not just nonsense or an arbitrary belief system based on wishful thinking. And it is really worthwhile to have a better idea of what's going on in that type of research.
Well, it's been lovely having you be here today, quite frankly. It's so refreshing to meet someone who is not just trying to do these things and write a sensational book, but is really trying to follow in the great Ian Stevenson's footsteps. So I really enjoy having you as a guest. We'll have to do this again. And thank you for being here. Consider yourself hugged across the pond.
Thank you.
Everyone, we've come to the end of our time. This has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. I'm so glad you were with us today. Never forget that you are a powerful, eternal being. You never began and you never will end. And when you get that, it changes everything in your life for the better. Next week, we'll be talking with Leonard Perlmutter, who is the founder and director of the American Meditation Institute in Averill Park, New York. And he's the author and editor of Transformation, the journal of meditation as mind-body medicine. Leonard has done a great deal of study in the field of Eastern religions and spiritual practices, and he's done that over many decades, both here and in India. He's the only person I know who has his own personal guru in the Himalayas, for heaven's sake. He teaches these practices now in the United States and in Canada. His topic next week is going to involve some discussion of yoga, but not much. Primarily, we're going to be talking about his new book, which is called Your Conscience, the key to unlock limitless wisdom and creativity and solve all of life's challenges. Wow, talk about a title. That's a mouthful. But his book is very good and it's very short. And the ideas that come from yoga are going to be familiar with people who are used to are talking about what Jesus actually said. I mean, there is a great spiritual truth, and we all get to see pieces of it. We've had a lot of experts on Seek Reality as guests who had some interest in the Eastern religions, but I think Leonard Perlmutter is the first one I've come across who was able to talk about Eastern practices in a way that Westerners could understand and find comfortable and easy. And that's important here because most of the people who listen here don't have an Eastern background. And frankly, it may be a little bit woo-woo and strange to be talking about some of the things that they talk about. So he tames it, he makes it sensible, and he talks about how our conscience is really something that isn't just, you took an extra cookie. It's something. Conscience means with wisdom. That's what it literally means. And he really talks about it in very profound ways. I think you're going to enjoy this. So please join us next week and we'll stretch our minds a bit and learn how we can use our consciences in exciting new spiritual ways. And today we've been enjoying learning about some of the various forms of reincarnation from Titus Rivas. He's written a book that's going to interest many listeners here. Titus has been researching reincarnation for decades as a scientific discipline. You saw how disciplined he is. And the result has been his new book called Reincarnation as a Scientific Concept. It's excellent. As I said to him, I especially loved, there were like 8 or 9 appendices, and I thought they were all excellent. He's a Dutch scholar. He's a reincarnation investigator in the mold of the wonderful Dr. Ian Stevenson, who was at the University of Virginia. He's gone ahead now. This book is terrific, and I'm so glad to be able at last to start to satisfy friends of mine who are interested in reincarnation and have said, for heaven's sake, why don't you talk about reincarnation? Well, now we have. You can reach Titus through his wonderful publisher, which is whitecrowbooks.com in Great Britain. As you know, my own nonfiction books are Liberating Jesus, My Thomas, The Fun of Dying, The Fun of Staying in Touch, The Fun of Growing Forever, The Fun of Living Together, and soon The Fun of Loving Jesus, Embracing the Christianity that Jesus taught. For kids, there's The Fun of Meeting Jesus. It's a pre-reader picture book. It's quite a beautiful book. And you can order all of these books through bookstores on Amazon.com, and the adult books are also available as audiobooks. If you want to talk to me about anything at all, don't hesitate to reach out. There's a green contact block on robertagrimes.com. And if you go there and send me an email with a question or a comment or whatever, I will email you back. It can take a week because I get a lot of emails, but it's very important to me to get back to you. And I do really read and enjoy everybody's email. This has been Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Please enjoy, please make the most of this coming week in our one reality, knowing that you are a powerful, eternal being, and you, most of all in the universe, you in particular, are infinitely loved.
You've been listening to Seek Reality with Roberta Grimes. Roberta blogs and answers questions at robertagrimes.com. Join us every week as we explore what the afterlife evidence and modern science combine to tell us is true about the one reality we all share. Knowing the truth changes everything.